Miramax Films is proud to present one of the most celebrated motion pictures of the year. The winner of the 1994 Palme d'Or, the best picture of the Cannes Film Festival.
Come on, let's get in character. I'm so interested in Big Man's wife. Well, he's going out of town in Florida, and he asked me if I'd take care of her while he's gone. Take care of her? No, man. Just show her a good time, make sure she don't get lonely. Girl. You see, this is a moral test of oneself.
I do believe Marcellus, my husband, your boss, told you to take me out and do whatever I wanted.
Whether or not you can maintain loyalty.
Night of the fight, you may feel a slight sting. Pride only hurts, it never helps. In the fifth, your ass goes down.
I have to say, you play with matches, you get burned.
We should have shotguns for this kind of deal.
We're in a lot of danger, aren't we?
I'm prepared to scour the earth for that moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
Get down, get down.
You got a corpse in a car, minus a head in a garage. Take me to it.
Don't you hate that?
Hey, what?
Uncomfortable silences.
John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, Uma Thurman, Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Amanda Plummer, Maria de Medeiros, Ving Rhames, Eric Stoltz, Rosanna Arquette, Christopher Walken, and Bruce Willis.
Looking at something, friend? Ain't my friend, Luca.
Die, you mother!
A new film directed by Quentin Tarantino. Pulp Fiction.
You really thinking about quitting?
Most definitely.
What you gonna do then?
Basically, I'm just gonna walk the earth.
What you mean walk the earth?
You know, like Kane in Kung Fu.
Well, season 6 is soon wrapping up, and we're finishing it out with some big episodes. That's right. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Reconcinimation. I'm your host, John Diner.
I'm David Munchak.
I'm Brent Hutchins.
And this is the podcast that takes a look back at some of our favorite films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And like I said, season 6 is winding down, and we've got some huge ones. We are going to dial way back to the year 1994. We're going to return to the QTCU with one of the most culturally significant films of the 90s, maybe in film history. We're looking at Pulp Fiction.
Boys, get to work.
Please would be nice.
Come again?
I said a please would be nice.
That's exciting. I would definitely venture to say it's one of the most culturally, at least influential in filmmaking, maybe for my lifetime. I mean, I caught the outskirts of the late 70s, but man, I was smack dab in the middle of high school when this one came out, and it changed the game.
Yeah, totally. It was I mean, to say it was huge is putting it lightly. Like this, I don't know. To me, you know, we grew up. We were all born after Star Wars came out, but to me, the impact of Pulp Fiction on cinema in 1994 is equivalent to what Star Wars did, and just totally breaking down walls and kind of. It's almost like opening up a new part of your brain to show people. You know, there's. I'll say, like, for television, I don't know. Maybe it was The Sopranos that did that. On the TV side,
skyrocketed HBO to series significance.
There was nothing on HBO before The Sopranos or after. You're right. It's absolutely.
Well,
but at the time there wasn't. Dream On was like the thing. Like that was the most popular thing I remember from from HBO prior to The Sopranos.
Yeah.
It was Dream On, it was Arliss, it was Oz. Like those were really what were out there, but it was really like one show at a time, and they didn't kind of change storytelling the way that show did. But Pulp Fiction did that I mean, like Star Wars. I also think like Orson Welles and Citizen Kane, showing different, and we're gonna obviously get really deep into this, but showing different styles of filmmaking that were not seen before. And Quentin Tarantino just ushered in this whole new wave of filmmakers and filmmaking styles. Is there any other, like, what other movies of the whatever 70s, 80s, 90s did you guys find that were even as close to as culturally significant as Pulp Fiction was? Titanic?
I mean, you mentioned
kidding.
No.
I'm kidding.
I mean, you mentioned Star Wars. I think that's one of them. I think that's definitely one of them. You're talking about culturally significant.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a hard time, like, really thinking through it as we were getting ready for the podcast. This absolutely may be the most culturally significant movie of my lifetime, which I know I just said, but like, just to reiterate, like, I think it really is. It's like, just, it changed the landscape of how people talked. I mean, there's so many different things in this movie that are still used and discussed, and catchphrases that get tossed around.
Yep.
That people probably have no clue at this point that they came from this movie, but like, this was the starting point of so much of it. And just on the filmmaking side of it, the significance that it had, I would liken with, some of the 70s stuff from Spielberg and Scorsese and, all the other guys from that era that kind of, again, reinvented how filmmaking was and storytelling was approached. I mean, this was that kind of film release.
And I'd say, like, I got into the business like late 2009, 2010 in Chicago. Like, I started, doing just work like in it. I hadn't, I watched things, but I never participated in it. But then, like, in those early days of, like, where I was offering my services for free, basically just to meet people, you get into the mix of this network of people, and then there's like film students, and then there's like, oh, we're having a showcase of film student things, and so to support, I would go. And I would say, like, most even then, in that year, most of the films were either copying Pulp Fiction or just Quentin Tarantino in general. Kevin Smith still, like, there was still like that post emo shit was still going on, so like that's why Kevin Smith was really in there. So it's like a lot of guys were making these films that still in 2010, like, because they're just that heavily influenced by, like, what this kind of thing, like a lot of guns and smoking. And I feel like Pulp Fiction is sort of like that's a student film, in that it's like, hey guys, like, let's make a movie and, like, let's put cursing in it, and like other adults will, like, we're like kids kind of, but like we get to play adults and we're gonna curse, and then other adults are like talking to us about the artistic merit of our film, so I could swear and talk about sex, like I invented all these things. It's like that, it's that certain, like, moment in time, where you expand your creativity and, like, figure shit out, and, like, you're not just some kid, and you're not just a student, you're a filmmaker, like. And so, like, this, as I'm watching this, I'm like reminded, like, oh yeah, like a lot of beats are there, and like compared to where Quentin goes from here, this feels like a very early film, right? Like, as we know it is. So that, like, he becomes a little more, like, I don't know, he becomes a tighter filmmaker as he goes. I think that this is like, there's no technical issues I can think of, or script issues necessarily. Like, it's just, I mean, I get it, but it's almost like I married the two in my head. Like, when I only watched Pulp Fiction, I think, for the first time about 7 years ago. So it's like I'd seen
Wow, really?
bits of it. but I'd seen other movies of his before, way before I seen Pulp
Sure.
Fiction. So yeah, and then watching this again, I'm like reminded of like, oh, that's probably where that turn of phrase came from in the mainstream. Like there were a couple things that Sam Jackson would say, going medieval on someone's ass. I'm like, oh, that's absolutely from there. Like that,
Yeah.
Just and popularizing certain phrases of things that pop a cap in your ass, and also lots of ass stuff.
A little bit in this one.
A lot of ass stuff in this.
A lot of ass stuff. That was the original subtitle for the movie.
Pulp Fiction, aka a lot of ass.
It's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned Kevin Smith, the head of that comment there, David, because I feel like I've my dates might be a little bit off, but I think Clerks came out like the week after or 2 weeks after this came out.
Yeah,
and obviously didn't do as well at the box office. I think it caught more steam at home video, but to think about both these people, and of course Tarantino had been around for a while, and he had done Reservoir Dogs and been writing and stuff like that, but to have kind of both those guys who really, for as far as I'm concerned, totally ushered the independent film bonanza of the 90s into fruition. To have both those films come out kind of that close and have them both be so significant, is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think at this point, it had been brewing for a few years, like really starting with Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and Steven Soderbergh in 1989. That independent movement, it's kind of again like we talk about the new Hollywood wave in the 70s, where it swung one direction away from the traditional studio film. Then after Star Wars, it kind of swings back, and the 80s are filled with almost nothing but studio movies. And then, the younger filmmakers coming up, it's again in 1989, it starts to swing back quietly, subtly, building 89, 90, other filmmakers coming along like Allison Anders and then of course, like you mentioned, Kevin Smith, Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino in like 1992 with El Mariachi, and of course we talked about Reservoir Dogs. You can dig that one out of the archives at ReconCinimation.com. We talked Reservoir Dogs there. We talked a little Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as well. So check that one out if you missed it. But yeah, all that's starting to take a real momentum, and you have a distributor and a production company like Miramax kind of like leading the way and guiding these filmmakers. And I'm not going to talk about Harvey Weinstein being the monster that he is, but the company was a very important company in the history of American cinema. But yeah, and 1994 with Clerks and with Pulp Fiction were really just kicked the door in, and I think forever changed how independent filmmaking for sure was made. And as those independent filmmakers became studio filmmakers and directors, that everything took a kind of a titanic shift there.
Yeah, I mean,
let's go. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think you have. I mean, some of the biggest filmmakers today, right now, are because of this, the influence that this movie had on the industry, right? Like, I mean, if you, like, I don't think you have like Jon Favreau, because of the success of this movie and things like Clerks, like Swingers got made, and that put him on the map. And then, next thing you know, he's directing, down the line, directing Iron Man, which brings in the whole MCU and all that stuff. And it's like, like, I just don't think that happens. Maybe it happens another way, but it doesn't happen in my mind without this door getting kicked down by a couple of these early movies.
Well, yeah, there's whether directly or indirectly related to Pulp Fiction. I mean, there's a tremendous. I would probably say the majority of, filmmakers were influenced by this movie and these movies in general. Yeah, totally. Like, you wouldn't have Swingers, you wouldn't have. There's a whole slew of imitations, and some kind of died there, and some continued with their careers and evolved into other things. That's a great path to kind of lay out that without Pulp Fiction, we don't get the MCU. We're saying it here.
Or The Mandalorian, you know, I mean, like that's all John
Yeah.
Favreau. You probably don't have like Sling Blade was another one that came out right
Yep.
around this time that
Yeah.
catapulted, you know, Billy Bob Thornton, which, you know, whatever his career's been kind of it's been all over the place, but you don't get things like Bad Santa, crazy shit that people love, you know. And so it's like, I don't know, man, like it's I mean, this movie was a big deal. It was
I think even the Coen brothers felt an after effect of the success of Pulp Fiction. You know, you look at everything they did before, you know, critical hits, but you know, not financial hits, not big, you know, success stories with, especially with Hudsucker Proxy. But then Fargo is the first one after, and getting, you know, after Pulp Fiction, they get back to their crime sort of roots, and you know, they're now celebrated a lot more than they had been prior. So, you know, there's a lot of people who rode the wave of the impact from Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
1994 is a year, it's such an interesting year. Maybe, I don't know, it's one of the most interesting years in film, you know, of the 90s specifically. That look back at the Oscars, you look back at, you know, it was Forrest Gump kind of winning everything, or a lot of things. Pulp was out there, Ed Wood was there. You know, they're like, it's just you know, Nobody's Fool, which we talked about. You can dig that one out of the archives as well, reconcinimation.com. Yeah, really fascinating lineup that when you look back at some of those movies and you think Forrest Gump, you know, what's the movies that stick with you, and then there's Forrest Gump.
Hey, be careful here, Bell. I still really like Forrest Gump, but
when was the last time you watched it, though?
I will tell you, it was within the last 6 months, because I watched it with Clark, and kind of got a kick out of seeing it again. But I was a huge fan of Forrest Gump. I think the fact that both these movies came out the same year and they're like on total opposite sides is kind of fascinating. I think obviously Pulp Fiction was much more culturally relevant, but I'm not going to bag on Forrest Gump. You won't find me bagging on you won't find me bagging on Forrest Gump.
Did you hate it walking out of the theater, John?
No, I loved it. I loved it for about 7 or 8 years. Big Forrest Gump fan. And then it was one of those that, like, when sometimes there are certain movies when you hit a certain age, you just switch on them. That, like, you
When's
just
the last time you watched it?
Yeah.
Probably 10 years ago, maybe. I mean, I've seen it enough times over the years. Like,
you should go back and watch it again, man. Like, don't be bagging on the Gump. I mean, it's hard because it is one of those movies that, I mean, at the time it was very popular.
Sure.
And it also spawned a bunch of, you know, SNL skits and comedy, you know, like, I mean, it was at the moment culturally relevant as well. You know, obviously, Tom Hanks is riding a storm of success at this time with Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, and then I think right after is Apollo, right?
Yep.
So it's like, you know, it was significant at the time. It didn't have the staying power, and it's become the butt of many jokes. But like, if you go back and check it out, it's not bad. It
has a great soundtrack.
Both these movies.
Roger Ebert, 4 stars to Forrest Gump. First of all,
that's right.
Well, everyone loved it when it came out, but it's one that's
that was one of my multiple.
Has not been kind.
That was one of my multiple theater viewing experience. I went to the theater a few times to watch Forrest Gump. I loved it.
The other one I would say is Ed Wood. Ed Wood is, like, to me, that's like Tim Burton's. I'm just thinking it as I'm saying it, but that's my favorite Tim Burton film. I think it's his best.
I would. Yeah, I missed Ed Wood at the theaters. I saw it at school, I think, because Jared was such a huge fan of it.
Me too. Yeah.
It kind of turned me onto it, and I watched it. And when I finally did, I was blown away. I would agree that I think it is likely his best filmmaking. And it doesn't. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I don't recall it falling into. And this is the hard stuff I have with Tim Burton is like I feel like some of his aesthetic and some of his approach is kind of gimmicky, and I don't feel like Ed Wood falls into that, or maybe just the subject matter works so well in that kind of style that it doesn't detract from it like I think it does in more of his later films. I mean,
Yeah,
I love his early stuff, and Ed Wood might be his last great one because I was not a fan of Sleepy Hollow or anything past that really. Like
I like Big Fish.
I like Big Fish. That's a good point. Big Fish and Big Eyes wasn't too bad.
Yeah, that was a little more. He's so well. We should save all this for our next Tim Burton episode, but he's so stylized that there's a lot of his recent films, like Alice in Wonderland. You know, those movies. It's like it's overwhelming visually. That a lot of his earlier stuff had the right balance of it.
Right.
And now it's just so much visual. It's distracting. But anyway, let's get back to Pulp Fiction. So when was the first time you guys saw Pulp Fiction? Anyone see it in the theaters, or was it home video for everybody? David, we'll get back to you. I know you just mentioned it.
I did, yeah. I saw it in the theater with I saw it with my buddy Andy. I don't recall if it was a bigger group. I feel like there were more of us there, but I know he and I saw it together, and immediately it changed our whole perspective on things. I mean, like I would go over to Andy's house after school almost every day in high school, and we would jam the soundtrack of Pulp Fiction, and just, I mean, it was like, dude, we were hooked. And I don't at this time, I'm too old to be able to straighten it all out. I don't know if I saw Reservoir Dogs before this. I'm pretty positive I did, but if I hadn't, like, you know, we definitely watched Reservoir Dogs over and over again after this because we were trying to get our fix on Tarantino stuff. Started hunting down other related type movies, you know, like Killing Zoe, which Steve Avery, who's one of kind of secretly a co-writer, I don't know how secret, but was kind of Tarantino's writing partner for a long time. And then, you know, obviously Natural Born Killers, shit like that. So yeah, we fell in pretty hard after this movie.
Yeah, I think that's the story for a lot of people, myself included. But David, so you only saw it, you said about 7 years ago was the first time you saw this?
Like, yeah, to sit down and watch it from beginning to end. Yeah, it was about 7 years ago.
Did we watch it together?
I don't think so. I think I was like, I need to watch this so I can have more conversations with you. So I was inspired. Like, it was time. Like, just, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was the first time. I haven't watched it since, though. I mean, and to be honest, you know, it's so much time from when this was sort of pivotal that it's now just part of history. So it's not like something I need to go back and watch, like, you know, very often. And to psych myself up, I was like, let me look now. And then, and Roger Ebert sort of does a nice thing. Like, years later, he published like a nice thing about why, like, this is just like one of the greatest films ever. So reading that, I'm like, all right, yeah, like, Ebert fucking knows what's going on. Like, you know, like, so the going in with that allowed me to sort of, you know, be more excited about watching it for the podcast. You know, and it's like, it's a series of vignettes, like, yeah, more or less, that I mean, they're connected. It's a one big story, and it's time jumping and this and that, but it feels like, oh, okay, after the first section I could pause it, and I'm gonna go make a sandwich, and I'll come back, and then I come back. Like, so there's like lots of little intermissions in there. But then the last half of the movie is when I was, you know, you've got those longer bits, and I think it's much more compelling, like, to get into it's rough getting into, like, just people talking to each other about random shit. when it like knowing like because I've seen a lot of student films that do that. Like they're bad. Like and when 20-year-olds don't have any fucking perspective on almost anything, so those films are bad. Like so, and I understand his style of like, the characters don't talk about the plot. They talk about like you get to know the characters, like, and so they're fun to watch. But then it's just I'm not sure where this is all going. Even though I saw the movie, it's just sort of like what is this? So again, I'm not an enthusiastic watcher, but I enjoyed everything that I watched. It's it's a lot. Every part is good.
Yeah, it's interesting. Real quick, it's interesting that you say that because so I love this movie when it came out in the theater, and then when it was released on home video, I would always struggle to watch through it all in one sitting because they would lose me at the Butch storyline.
Yes. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. So I was all in, and then it would get to that part, and it starts to slow down after the fight, and I'm just like, I don't know. And so for the longest time, like I would only watch like the first half of this movie. Like I love this movie, and I'm glad I rewatched it because it reminded me of that kind of first time I saw it all the way through, and I was kind of enamored the whole time. But right afterwards, and listening to the music and being infatuated with it, and like even before it came out on video, you were talking about it all the time. Everybody's using the phrases, like there was a little bit of a burnout. And so like when you get it on home video and you try and watch it and you get to that slower part, you kind of like, I'm kind of with you, David. Like I was sort of detach. I would make a sandwich and just not go back to watch it for a long time. And then like as rewatchable as certain parts of it are, like as a whole thing, I don't find this to be his most rewatchable movie, like to just sit down and watch over and over again. Like for me, that if I was to pick one, I would say I still think it might be Reservoir Dogs, but on rewatching this time, it didn't hit me as much. I was like, okay, I acknowledged how it slowed down. I know why it slows down, and like there are key moments that I'm like, okay, this just takes the breath out of it a little bit, but I got through it, and then it picks right back up, and I'm like, oh, this shit is fucking great again.
Yeah, I want to put a pin in the Butch sequence because I think we're going to talk about this shortly. We're going to kind of walk it through segment by segment a little bit, but I don't disagree with you guys at all about that. I still feel that way, but yeah, I actually missed this one in theaters. When this came out in '94, if there was any movie that like looked different, I was not going to see it. I was pretty much only watching, your clear and present dangers, definitely Forrest Gump, Wyatt Earp, those, big studio movies was all I was really watching. It wasn't until I heard the soundtrack, I think maybe the spring of '95, and I knew it was very publicized, Pulp Fiction. You kind of couldn't miss it. But the soundtrack, I was at my friend Brian's house and he played it, and I was like, whoa, this music is so different and cool. And, hearing the dialogue clips that were in the soundtrack, like, piqued my interest. So I finally saw it on home video, and I don't think I've been as, maybe I guess Star Wars was the only other time, like, I feel like someone took the filmmaking part of my brain and just shook it and, like, woke me up, that, like, oh my God, like, this, look what you can do with storytelling. It doesn't have to be that straightforward, analog storyline, that this is, so the characters are different. It looks different. The time jumping and the crossing of the storylines, like all that was so fresh and different and new, and it blew everybody away. It was it started this wave of imitators, some better than others, but I was obsessed. So then I saw Reservoir Dogs, and I started writing, and all the stories I was writing were all like just like Pulp Fiction, gangsters with personality who were like, storylines crisscrossing and bank robberies and all that. And I thought I was hot shit. but it was a lot of fun. But I don't know. So but then after that, I was the biggest Tarantino fan, and then Brent, we met up in film school, and we were still in that wave. Like when we got there was just months before Jackie Brown came out, and it was how is he gonna turn around for his third movie? How is it gonna be as good, and how is it gonna compare? And a lot of people were let down by Jackie Brown at the time. Again, check it out in the archives, ReconCinemation.com. You can hear what we thought about Jackie Brown, which I love. But all through college, I started to feel like, God, that rebellious side of like everybody loves Pulp Fiction so much that I'm starting to dislike it. So I kind of turned around on it for years. And I was like, I didn't want to watch it. I didn't want to talk about it. I was like, it's, yes, it's great, but enough. Like, let's do something different now. And then I watched it maybe 10 years ago. Totally fell back in love with it. Like I saw all the genius all over again, and thinking about when it came out and what other movies were around.
Yeah. Yeah, Tarantino just has this amazing ability to write a scene, like it's sometimes the kind of the threads from scene to scene get a little weird. They don't quite line up, but man, like just from start to finish of a scene, some of his scenes are absolutely some of the best that have ever, I feel, ever been done, just the way that he's able to craft the storytelling within that segment. And so this movie happens to be built out of several of them where it kind of features that ability. And I think there's just, some of them are fantastic. Some of them are not as strong, but most of them are great. And so when you're watching it and you get to one that's not as great, you're like, oh, I feel this. I think I said that his writing partner's name was Steve Avery earlier, but it's Roger Avery, I think.
Roger Avery, right.
So fact check me on that. But yeah.
I've always been impressed. He already sent a cease and desist letter, so.
Yeah. I've always been impressed with Quentin Tarantino's ability to write it. Like I know a lot of people love Inglourious Bastards. I don't there are elements of that movie, and there was a long time where I was kind of over Quentin Tarantino, but I went and saw Inglourious Bastards at the theater, and that opening scene at the farmhouse is one of the best written and put together scenes I think ever made. Like it is so compelling and so written with anxiety. The performances are freaking amazing. Like it is,
well, and
incredible.
It's Hitchcockian too. I mean, it's very that film in particular is very much a Hitchcock kind of feel of the buildup of tension all within a scene. It's I think it's a masterpiece.
I 100% agree. And like I was saying, I kind of fell out of love with Tarantino for a little bit because, to your point, John, a little bit of too much of a good thing can get a little dull. And I hadn't really been paying that much attention to him for a bit, and went to the theater, saw that movie, and that scene, like I fell back in love, and I've seen everything he's done since, and I'm like excited to see the next thing. And I'm, some of them I don't love, is like Hateful Eight. I'm not a huge lover of Hateful Eight, but I'm still on board to see what this thing's going to do, just in case there's another scene that's as amazing as that one. Not that we're here to talk about Inglourious Bastards, but
no, I agree. I've been up and down with him ever since that. I'm not a big Kill Bill fan. I'm definitely not a Hateful Eight fan, although I love the concept and I love the cast. It was just too gruesome, too violent, and I didn't agree with where it ended up. I'm not a fan of Django, really, but I love Inglourious Bastards. I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And Tarantino's going to be a filmmaker. I don't believe his next one is going to be his last. Maybe he'll go on a break again, but I don't see him living the rest of his life and not directing another movie.
Yeah.
I'll always give him a chance.
that'd be hard to believe. Yeah, a lot of people don't like Django either, but I actually am one of the ones that I do like that movie.
Well, it's that one for me goes to back to the racist element that is so pervasive in his films, the use of the N-word,
Sure.
like I somehow he's gotten away with that this whole time, and I don't know if it's because I
Sam
don't know,
Jackson gives him a pass.
totally, yeah,
Like he's
and
talked
that's
about
why
it
he
even.
gets it,
Like, yeah, he's
yeah,
talked about it. Like I mean, he's thinking of Django, like he gave a pass to Leo as well I mean, I think another one of those great scenes and most of it is the performance of Leo in Django in the parlor room where he
hmm,
I mean, that is the intensity of that scene is so great.
yeah,
And I mean, again, it's like I'm not even for me at this point, it's not even do I love the full movie? It's like, is there a scene in this movie that rocks me? And every one of his movies has at least one scene that rocks me, and I'm like, okay, that was worth watching to see
sure,
that.
yeah. Well, I mean, going back again to Pulp specifically, like there's so many elements of this film that just kind of blew everybody away. And Reservoir Dogs has pieces of it, but Reservoir Dogs also feels like a play.
Sure.
He's got the cool characters that you can kind of start to feel more humanized than gangsters previously. Like you had a few different kinds of gangsters. You had your Godfather gangsters, you had your Martin Scorsese kind of gangsters, and then you had your dumb idiot gangsters who were just like stormtroopers, just dumb morons. But this time,
Can't hit a thing.
exactly. Um, Here you've got gangsters who feel like real people. They talk like real people. They're talking about TV shows. They're talking about movies. They're saying some of the same things that we would say, as regular folks. So there's suddenly
I think
these
they're
characters. Go ahead, Brent.
Oh, I was going to say, I think their conversations are interesting because I think that the content of their conversations are things that you're right, people would talk about. Like you'd be walking about shit, just shooting the shit, right? But like the way that it's written and the specific dialogue that's used and the slang that he creates and adds gives it this, I feel like very at the time, now it's kind of become more commonplace, but at the time, especially with Pulp, gave it this super unique, hip, like it was like, yeah, I would talk to my buddies about the Royale with cheese, but like the way that they're having the conversation felt very kind of different and unique and kind of mesmerizing in a way. Like it was almost lyrical.
But you know the funniest thing about Europe is?
What?
It's the little differences. I mean, they got the same shit over there that they got here, but it's just there. It's a little different.
Example.
All right, well, you can walk into a movie theater in Amsterdam and buy a beer. And I don't mean just like a little paper cup. I'm talking about a glass of beer. And in Paris, you can buy a beer in McDonald's. And you know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
Oh, man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what the fuck a quarter pounder is.
And what do they call it?
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
What do they call a Big Mac?
Big Mac's a Big Mac, but they call it Le Big Mac.
Le Big Mac. What do they call a Whopper?
I don't know. I didn't go on a Burger King.
Oh yeah, it's all very musical and lyrical like that. There is that beat to these conversations, and it is like, yeah, that's like me and my friends hanging out. That's like what we talk about. Like nobody sounds that cool. Like, but it
No,
is this like, it's idealistic though. It's like, but like, yeah, we just talk about bullshit. Like it's like, you almost so you immediately relate to these characters that could be these complete monsters or whatever. But they're like anyone else. You talk, you've got different interests, and you talk about odd bullshit or commentary on pop culture. Like, So there's always a character that knows a lot about films. Luckily, that I was like, I forgot that like it's very minimal in this one, like compared to others. But it's just, which was a relief to me because I just hate that, like filmmakers talking about filmmaking in the movie that also features filmmaking. It's like, all right, I got it. But that's just a preference. But like, it just the way everyone just has a conversation, and it's so frustrating because like I understand this was a hit because it was so head turning, and then like it has influenced so many filmmakers, and I'm sure it's influenced even things that are in the mainstream. But it's like just take 10% of what he's doing in your Independence Day sequel and add it to like how the characters talk to each other, and at least people can maybe care about this stupid vapid shit that you're putting on the screen. Like, just don't have like a 3/4 page dial interaction between two leads and then like, well, that's all we get to know about them personally, and now we're supposed to expect them to like fight for each other and love each other or whatever. It's like your character, like these characters end up so flat because they're not having a conversation, or they're only talking about the plot, like the action of the film. It's just, man, just take some of this, like just do something with it. He's handing you gold, like,
Yeah.
And he's not the first filmmaker to do that, but it's just like it's like, hey, you can enjoy something that can be like wildly enjoyed by almost anybody here, like, because it's just so well done. I don't know. That's what I was walking away on this, like this last viewing, like, oh God, please keep ripping him off, like,
yeah,
like do what he did.
Well, and he would kind of ghostwrite, a lot of other movies, like Crimson Tide's always the example I use, that you can suddenly,
Quicksilver, the Quicksilver scene.
That's totally the Silver Surfer. Yeah, the Silver Surfer argument. Yeah. That like suddenly you realize, oh yeah, that's Tarantino. Like suddenly they're arguing about who's the better Silver Surfer. I think artist at the time, is it one or the other, and you can feel that. But like he was even in the beginning, right off the bat in Reservoir Dogs. I don't think this conversation has aged very well. But the fact that these gangsters are opening the movie at a roundtable discussion talking about Madonna and the meaning of one of her songs, like, is suddenly like brings the characters down to our level, and we can identify with them. And he's so good at that. And there's, especially with Jules and Vincent in this one, that, right when we meet them, you're in this conversation about, Amsterdam and Royale with cheese and everything that they're talking about. And then part of his signature is he pivots immediately into extreme violence.
Right.
Yeah.
That he'll balance that out from like, oh, these guys, like, just when you like them, then you see them do something horrible.
Yeah.
And we see that over and over. But that's just one of his signatures, the kind of mixing like the humor and violence with when Vincent blows Marvin's head off, and like it's such a funny moment.
Look, I'm telling Marcellus today, I'm through.
Well, why don't you tell him at the same time why?
Don't worry, I will.
Yeah, and I bet you $10,000 he laughs his ass off.
I don't give a damn if he does.
Marvin, what do you make all this?
Man, I don't even have an opinion.
Well, you gotta have an opinion. I mean, do you think that God came down from heaven and stopped everything?
Oh, what the fuck's happening? Oh,
man,
shit,
man. Oh, man, I shot Marvin in the face.
Why the fuck you do that?
Well, I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident.
Horrible and hilarious.
Yeah.
But also, let's talk about the casting too, because he's probably, I don't know, his mind of the casting part of his mind is genius. I mean, especially in this one, to find this group of actors, you've got pulling John Travolta from his career deathbed.
Yeah,
right?
This reinvigorated his career. I mean, for the next, at least until Battleship Earth or whatever the hell that movie was.
John Travolta is riding the Pulp Fiction wave today. Like he has written, how many gangster movies has he done? And he's had some other good movies come out there, but like Get Shorty was his next big hit. And what is that? Basically a high style version of Vincent Vega, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Broken Arrow, Face Off. Like all of that has elements of what Tarantino found in him.
Yeah. Well, he's always been the cool guy. Saturday Night Fever, right? He was the cool guy.
He was, but you're talking
80s.
like his
Cotter.
I mean, he was
Welcome back, Cotter. He was cool. Like
he
he's
was.
always
Look
cool.
who's talking. Like that's where he was at this point in his career. Which
highly
as a
successful
child,
film series. Highly successful.
Sure, yeah.
Right, but not where he wanted to be, and not a huge box office draw. That was a kids movie that brought in family.
It's a family film. It's not a kids movie.
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, no, that's
it is. It's a movie you can take your kids to.
Travolta's career was, you know, had after what, like 1981 or 82, had really pivoted, and he was doing like light movies, and you know, Look Who's Talking. They're all financially successful movies, or at least the first two were, but his street cred had gone in the toilet.
Yeah. I mean, this put him back on the map. Like everybody knew who Travolta was. Of course, he had a huge successful career prior to this, but he was definitely not. He was on the decline here when all of a sudden he came out with this, and it absolutely shot him right back up to A-list. And he got, I mean, to your point, John. I mean, he's been milking it ever since, you know. But I'm still saying Battlefield Earth or Battleship Earth or whatever the hell that movie.
Battlefield Earth, I think,
was when it may have gone sideways for him. But up to that point, he was making good shit that a lot of people were going to see. You know, like it was like success after success after success, even for shit like Michael. And Phenomenon. You know, I mean, like those are not even the gangster type movies, but they were drawing crowds. I saw Phenomenon in Arizona. I went on some trip with my dad, and I saw that movie at a pre-screening, and people knew what it was. They were like openly talking about what movie it was. It was packed. Like people were excited to see that movie, at least in Arizona. I don't know how it ended up doing, but
I think it did well. I remember it doing well.
Yeah. I mean, there was not an open seat in the theater.
Yeah.
So it was bananas what this movie did to his career.
Oh yeah.
I mean to everybody's career involved. It was crazy.
Everybody.
I mean, he brought in the gang he brought in some of the gang from Reservoir Dogs, right? And like he got Bruce Willis to sign for basically, you know,
nothing.
Yeah, basically minimum, like
wow.
The minimum, right? Just so he could get him in.
Yeah.
And you know, Bruce Willis was probably the biggest name at the time in the movie.
Oh,
he was the biggest A-list guy in the movie, but like everything he had been doing up to this point recently was not great. It was not doing great. You know, I mean, it was Death Becomes Her and, you know, Hudson
Striking
Hawk
Distance
and Striking Distance. Like
don't jog on Striking Distance.
I would never, but it's, you know, like it reinvigorated his career again.
Color of Night was like
soft porn. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was such a, I mean, that almost killed his career right there. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
And it's not the worst movie. Like really, it's not that bad, but the you know, and this is also, remember, Hudson Hawk was only a few years before this.
That's what, yeah. 100%. And so like he again was the biggest A-list actor involved in the shoot, but his career needed a bump, and this certainly provided that. And then it put Sam Jackson on the map. Like he had done a little bit here and there, but he was definitely not a household name out of this movie. And he was in everything, you know, like,
I feel like Sam Jackson's the one who's capitalized the most from this, because he'd been around. I mean, I remember he was in Do the Right Thing. He was in a lot of early Spike Lee stuff. He was around. He's in True Romance. He's in Goodfellas. Of course, you know, don't forget Jurassic Park.
Oh, no, you can't forget that part. He's great.
National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1.
Didn't even see it.
Good movie.
Great movie.
Funny.
Great movie. Yeah.
Funny.
And
funny.
The first,
I'll take your word for it.
The first time he worked with Bruce Willis.
Did he work with Bruce Willis on that? Okay, good.
He's worked with Bruce Willis like 6 times, I think.
Yeah.
So,
well, how many of those were just the one Die Hard movie, right?
One Die Hard, Pulp Fiction, Loaded Weapon 1, 2 of the, Unbreakable. Again, check that one out in the archive.
That's right.
And
that's right.
Glass. Was it Glass?
Glass, yeah.
Glass was the big
and
one.
I feel like there's one more I'm forgetting. Something else.
Yeah, they're buddies.
They're pals, right?
But God,
then,
Sam Jackson.
And then Uma Thurman. I mean, Uma Thurman's another one whose career was created by this character, basically.
Yeah, and she'd also been around. Like she was in Baron Munchausen, and
well, that's the thing. They were like recognizable, but they weren't like name actors. Like people weren't, they weren't people that you could be like, oh, that's whoever. They're not bankable, but after this movie, that all changed. Changed
they all look so different, right? Like when you see the 4 of them on there's many different posters, 98% of which is just Uma Thurman in character and looking like, with the old pulp magazines.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, the 4 of them looking so different. Travolta with the long hair and Sam Jackson in his getup and Bruce Willis, I think this was the first movie where he had the shaved head look, at this point. So, I don't know. Uma's they're all great in this movie. There's not even close to a bad performance in this one. Well, that's not, I'll take that. I'll walk that back a little bit when we get to the Butch sequence, but
fair enough.
Yeah, and then the movie is littered with great character actors. Tim Roth, Amanda Plummer, Steve Buscemi. Appears for just a moment. Of course, Harvey Keitel. Now, Harvey Keitel, Tarantino owes a lot to him because it's Keitel's sign off on Tarantino for Reservoir Dogs, which is what gives him respectability and his own street cred, which is I think what Bruce Willis was looking at when he was looking at trying to move his career in a direction and find a young up and coming filmmaker that he can kind of jump on the bandwagon with. And he did this. I mean, it was brilliant for Bruce to do this movie and to hook up with Tarantino. And look at what Tarantino's done since. I mean, almost every movie he finds somebody who's old school, maybe hasn't been seen in a while. Now, God forgive me, but I'm even going to put, our dearest Kurt Russell in that category. That years later, when Kurt was not doing, as many great movies, we'll say that, he casts him in Death Proof and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Hateful Eight. Like he's used him multiple times. So, but God, the list is kind of endless for this movie. So, there's a lot of familiar faces and a lot of great performances here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel familiar faces because of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. The soundtrack is another.
It's its own character all to itself.
Yeah, like the music and it's done well in Reservoir Dogs, but this is like another level of just having the music that sets a tone and gives you an energy for a scene.
Well, and it's kind of awesome. Like when I was watching it, I love it's so like it engulfs you when it happens, right? So they cut to the Jungle Boogie song, like that's right after the diner scene gets going, and then there's like a needle scratch and a new song comes on and it like changes the mood a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you meet Jules and Vincent, and it's like it's cool that he's able to use it within the credits as a transition to go from kind of one vibe from this one scene to the next vibe, right? And it's it's just good music also. You're like listening, you're like, hell yeah, dude, like let's party.
And obscure music. It's music that were not, not popular songs of the era. This movie is more than all the others really shows, okay, like young Butch, when we see young Butch in the Christopher Walken scene, like just sitting in front of the TV, like that's Tarantino. That's what he did. He was plopped in front of the TV, so his whole brain is influenced by, 1960s television, music, and this, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where we really see that come through. But it's very evident in the soundtracks. And then I would say, on top of all that is the narrative structure that we didn't see this at the time. Movies were basically told in either a linear fashion or they would use flashbacks. But this, the way this story jumps around and that the sequences are all out of order, and you have to kind of think for a minute of what is the actual timeline of this movie when Travolta is killed halfway through, and then the rest of the half of the movie, the back half of it, is filled with his character.
But that's so to me, I agree. Like the whole jumping around narratively is absolutely unique and something that movies started to try and do themselves. I think Christopher Nolan is someone who does that a lot, and I would have a hard time believing that he was not influenced in some way by this. But in this movie, Vincent gets shot. I think all of it plays pretty linear until you get to the part where Vincent's back alive after you've seen him get shot. Right. So like, I don't feel like there's a bunch of time jumps in this movie. I feel like there's one time jump really and for me, when I saw it the first time, I remember thinking like, what the fuck just happened? Like, do they have the reels out of order in the movie? Like, I'm confused. But like when you're watching it, I don't feel like it sticks out, and it feels like a movie that has a lot of time jumps, but really the only time jump that I feel like actually feels present is the one where Vincent gets killed, and then we see Jules and Vince back in the house.
Well, let's talk through the timeline because this is how I think that it goes, right? So if you were doing it sequentially, it would be the Christopher Walken scene, the precursor to the Gold Watch segment, right? That would be first.
That to me plays like a flashback, though, like just a natural kind of flashback.
Right. Sure.
Okay.
Then you've got the Jules and Vincent stuff as they, go, try to retrieve the briefcase and everything, and the whole storyline with Marvin, right?
Yes.
Then you would have would go right into the Bonnie situation towards the end with Winston Wolfe. Then you would have the diner sequence with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny. Then you would have, let's see, what would be after that? Then it would be
Vincent and Butch Vincent and Butch in the. Well, yeah, Vincent and Mia, or it could be Vincent and Butch in Marcellus's bar.
Right. Yeah, right. That, and then Vincent and Mia, and then you'd have the Butch storyline, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that's it. Then it would end. Basically, the movie is over when Butch rides off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you lay it out, it is all very time jumpy. You're right.
Yeah.
Still, the only one that really ever struck me as a time jump is when Vincent goes from being dead to being alive.
Right.
In all honesty, like up until that point, I don't think you would realize that there was a time jump in anything.
Yeah, I agree.
So like that's when he says, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're not linear." Right?
Yeah.
And I think from that point on, then it gets all like, okay, well, what's exactly happening here?
Yeah, I remember, being so shocked when Vincent Vega's killed halfway through the movie. Like, how are we doing the back half of this movie without this character who I thought was the lead?
Yeah. It took me out of it for a second. I remember like thinking that when I was watching, I was like, wait, what just, I'm very confused right now.
And then I was so happy when he's back. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, we get a lot more of this character. Great. All right, let's quickly just kind of walk through the backstory, and then we'll hit a few more of these segments up. But so Roger Avery and Quentin wrote this script, the original draft in 1990. Then kind of dove back into it after they shot Reservoir Dogs and did another pass through on it. So 92 and early 93, they were rewriting this script. They did go to Amsterdam, so we can tell where that part of the story came from. And they had originally wanted to make this as like an anthology, which it does have that kind of feeling, but it evolved over time. And Tarantino, coming off the critical success of Reservoir Dogs, he was sought after by Lawrence Bender was his producer. They had brought this script to Jersey Films, which was Danny DeVito's company, who had done some of the initial financing, but their deal was with Columbia TriStar, and they, as a studio, were afraid to produce and release this movie with the amount of sex, drugs, and violence in it. So they actually backed off, and that's when Miramax came in, and who already had the relationship with Quentin, swooped in and were very eager to make this This is technically the first release by Miramax after they were bought out by Disney. So to think Disney put out Pulp Fiction is
it's an Oscar-winning Disney film.
Walt Disney proudly presents Pulp Fiction.
Why wasn't the one of the opening title cards, Tinkerbell at the Magic Kingdom and flying heck in the big half arch?
It's like Paramount in the Friday the 13th movies, right? That right. Yeah. Oh yeah, I guess we made this. But I just want to mention too some of the other, but I didn't want to get through the podcast without mentioning some of the other department heads that really helped visually form this movie, and that's Sally Menke, the late Sally Menke, the editor, who is such a key component here of structuring this film, and I think was very influential on Tarantino in general. And after her passing, I think you saw a shift in the tone of his movies that I wonder, had she lived, what it would have felt like if their relationship continued. But also Betsy Heyman, the costume designer, Andre Sakula, the director of photography, and David Wasco, the production designer, kind of all working, like on any film, all working together, but it's like everyone's nailing it.
Well, and he brought a number of these folks, and maybe you already said this, sorry if I missed it, but he brought a number of these folks over from Reservoir Dogs, right? Like a lot of his key department heads were like, he already basically had the crew in place. He was like, let's go.
Oh yeah. If it's working, just roll right into the next thing. So let's look at we'll talk about some of the we've already talked about a few of them, but we'll just kind of cover some of the others. Kicking right off the bat with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny. So Lindsay, my wife, knows this whole movie verbatim. I tried really hard to get her to come on, but she schedules wouldn't allow it. But when Pulp Fiction comes up, she can quote the whole movie, and she can just go on because not just the soundtrack, but it was such a pop culture thing that it was so popular, and the Pumpkin Honey Bunny dialogue is part of it.
I'm ready. Let's do it right now, right here. Come on.
All right. Same as last time, remember? Your crowd control. I handle employees.
I love you, Pumpkin.
I love you, Honey Bunny.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
Great casting there. Tim Roth returning, who was, I guess, maybe the lead technically of Reservoir Dogs, and a great independent actor in the 90s and 2000s, and still, I mean, still great. But yeah, him, and of course the always interesting Amanda Plummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a lot.
Yeah, she's interesting because I feel like in the opening scene with them, she's playing it a little bit more straight, but then at the bookend, at the end of the movie, I feel like you see a little bit more of her eccentric kind of acting style and delivery, and it's fantastic too, man. Like she's really captivating in that scene when she's like nervous for Pumpkin. Is that who we're calling Tim Roth, right? Is Pumpkin?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Because she's Honey Bunny, right? So
hold on.
Yeah.
I gotta check.
Yeah,
that.
yeah. She's Honey
he's
Bunny.
Pumpkin, she's Honey Bunny. Yeah.
Yeah. So when the bookend of that, when Sam Jackson is explaining why they're not going to take the briefcase, she's so good, man. Like she's just so chaotic, and like
she's like really a scared child, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But
she is an interesting actress.
Yeah, for sure. So great in So I Married an Axe Murderer. Just brilliant there.
Yes.
That scene though sets the tone for the movie. That we sit down with these guys and we can tell that they're quote unquote villains, right? Like you can tell by what they're talking about, robbing, sticking people up and robbing places, and debating about robbing a restaurant versus a bank and what the differences are. But again, the dialogue is all rooted in reality. And then right at the end of that scene, it pivots and they draw their guns and hold up the place. And then we go into the credit sequence.
Yeah, and her delivery of that line, I mean, sets it off, right? Like but it kicks off the whole thing and then goes right into the music. And it's like, fuck, dude, what did I just watch?
Yeah, yeah. And you're just like, I love the font of the credits, and I love the choice of music, and you're just seeing all those actor names, like most of which you kind of knew at the time. And it's just like, okay, all these people, like this is going to be an interesting movie. And then we get into Jules and Vincent. And I mean, they have to be the most likable gangsters probably in film history. Like I just want to be in the back seat of that car, not with the gun pointed at me.
No, you don't. That's what Marvin was in the back seat of that car. You don't want to be there, buddy.
That's true. I'll be in the middle. I'll be the middle of the bucket seat.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to ride on the bench seat.
Yeah. Just talking about like everything that they're talking about. And they're so casual. And I don't know, like it had been so long since you see Travolta that relaxed into a character.
Well, and that cool. Like he was just fucking cool, man. Vince is cool.
And to be that cool next to Sam Jackson.
Yeah. Think about that. How do you pull that off?
Yeah.
Because Sam Jackson is a badass motherfucker.
Yeah. But they're so great, and we just follow them all the way up to the apartment. And once they get to that door, then they switch. They switch into violent mode. And
that conversation about the foot massage, dude, everything, man, the whole dialogue in that scene is just great.
Yeah. And it's also creating the world, right? Like they're talking about Tony Rocky Horror, and they're talking about Marcellus Wallace and his wife, and these characters that we haven't seen yet or may not ever see. But it's painting such a clear picture of the universe, the QTCU, the beginning of it. So.
Well, and it doesn't feel like forced exposition. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like a natural like it feels legitimate.
Yes.
And like, okay, these are two dudes in this world that are talking about some wacky shit that went down.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, is this considered the world of Tarantino or one of the movies in the world of Tarantino? You know how like Kill Bill is like a movie in that world.
This is
the world.
This is the world of Tarantino. So this
Okay,
is
got
the
it.
existing universe, whereas, we talked
Yeah.
about it in our previous episodes, but there are movies of his that take place within the world of
Right.
of Tarantino,
You would
which is
go to a
Kill Bill.
theater. You would go to a
Yeah,
theater and see Inglourious Bastards. You would go to a
exactly.
theater and see Kill Bill. Gotcha.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it.
And we'll come back to Kill Bill because there's a direct connection here. So,
There's a connection to another one of his movies. That's crazy.
Never happens.
Holy shit.
then we get the, infamous Ezekiel 25:17.
Yeah. More influence on the rest of the look, dude. If you go and look at Nick Fury's tombstone in the Avengers movie, it quotes, I forget the exact quote that's on there, but it's from Ezekiel, and it says, "You shall feel my wrath." 25:17. Yeah, like
I didn't know that.
it made it all the way to the MCU. Like,
that's cool.
I mean, it's an amazing scene. Like the build up, and again, we talked about the tension and the build up of that Tarantino can do. That's kind of Hitchcockian. This isn't quite Hitchcockian in tone, but it's like they're there to do something bad to these three guys, but you don't know what or how it's going to happen. And then the whole evolution of the scene, talking about the big Kahuna burger and the drink, and then suddenly Sam Jackson just walks over. Jules just walks over and casually shoots the guy on the couch, like. And then torments, Frank Whaley, who's also, great in this scene, that he tortures him mentally before executing him. And then at this point, like, we hadn't seen something like that, like quoting the Bible at somebody right before murdering them.
Right. And then Jerry Seinfeld leaps out of the bathroom with a gun.
Alexis Arquette. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember the moment I saw that the first time, like, whoa, Jerry Seinfeld.
Jerry Seinfeld is going to get shot by Sam Jackson.
And then Kramer comes bursting through the door. And George is in the bathroom. No. And then we see the MacGuffin, right? Or one of the MacGuffins, I guess, which is the briefcase.
The briefcase, yeah.
And so much debate at the time of like, what's in the briefcase? What's the gold glow? Is it gold? Is it something else? Is it Marcellus Wallace's soul? I've heard
that one.
That was the thing with he's got the bandage on the back of his neck. Yeah. That there was an old, I don't know where the story came from, but like his soul was stolen from him, and he's got Jules and Vincent on a mission to recover it.
I mean, at some point, there has to be clarity on this now at this point, right? Like,
I don't know.
Someone must have asked Tarantino, "Hey, what's in the briefcase?"
I'm sure he's been asked a million times. I don't think he's ever. I'd have to dig into it, which I didn't have time to do before we recorded. But I've never heard of definitive story. So what, David?
I think it's the U.S. Constitution. Is that what I think it is? Yeah. Absolutely. Or it could be the Declaration of Independence.
This Pulp Fiction is a prequel to National Treasure.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nick Cage is missing from this movie.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But it's interesting that these Jules and Vincent are so likable, and then you just see how horrible they actually are.
They can be reasoned with. They can have a change of heart, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating. They're just like us, except they're murderers.
Except they're murderers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we meet Butch for the first time. We see the back of Marcellus Wallace's head in that, set up for what is going to happen with Butch later on, where he's being told to throw a fight. And, Bruce is playing a pretty deadpan, but you can tell that he's not going to do that. Like, that's not going to sit well with him.
Yeah.
And then I love the like little mini confrontation between Butch and Vincent that also sets up how they meet again later.
Little foreshadowing.
Yeah, and we got our second product, the Red Apple cigarettes, which is Red Apple and Big Kahuna Burgers are the brands in the QTCU that keep appearing.
That's right.
And then we start to spend some time with Vincent. And originally, the character was they were going to cast Michael Madsen. The character is the brother of Vic Vega, which is Mr. Blonde from Reservoir Dogs. So at one point in time, there's a potential sequel that was going to be the Vega brothers, where you see the two of them together. They were talking about casting Michael Madsen, but at the time, he was really starting to get popular. He was in The Getaway in '94. He was in Species in '94. So it may have come down to him not being available, which opened the door for Tarantino or Travolta to be cast. So I'm not totally sure about that, but it feels reasonable. We start to see him, and he meets up with Eric Stoltz and Rosanna Arquette, and buys some heroin, and shoots up, and we see like they make it look like it's the coolest thing. Like they make drugs look like it's almost like an advertisement for it.
Heroin. Everybody's doing it.
Except when you have to get adrenaline shot in your heart because you OD'd.
Yeah, except for that part.
But you're not supposed to snort it, silly Mia.
Oh, yeah.
And then we meet Mia Wallace, played by Uma Thurman, and just an amazing character that, again, I could just want to be a fly on the wall for that night out for Vincent and Mia.
Don't you hate that?
Hey, what?
Uncomfortable silences. Why do we feel it's necessary to yak about bullshit in order to be comfortable?
I don't know. That's a good question.
That's when you know you found somebody really special. And you can just shut the fuck up for a minute, comfortably share silence.
Well, I don't think we're quite there yet, but don't feel bad. We just met each other.
I'll tell you what. I'm gonna go to the bathroom and powder my nose. You sit here and think of something to say.
I'll do that.
What a night.
Crazy night.
Yeah, but like even before, just the two of them, the dialogue between each other, that it's like
when they get back to the house and the walls are down, like the awkward walls have come down. They have that, I don't know what you call it, awkward silence in the door, and then he's all talking to himself about like he knows this could go sideways. He knows he could be the next guy thrown off the fourth floor or whatever into a glassed garden, so.
And then we see Jackrabbit Slims, which is, I don't know, if there's ever a set that I want to go, I want to be in reality, it's that one.
Yeah.
When I was at Imagineering, there's a building there. They call it the bowling alley. It's a converted bowling alley on Sonora and Flower, and it's one of the offices there. But it's the face of Jack Rabbit Slims. Like it's the exterior of it. So like every time you go into that building, it would feel like you were going to Jack Rabbits. It was pretty cool.
And that's David, were you going to say something?
Nope.
That is like going into Tarantino's mind, right? Like going into the 50s and 60s and all the popular, celebrities and singers and actors of the time, and they're walking around and just either singing or performing, or they're the waiters and waitresses, and all the booths are those 1950s cars. It's just such an amazing set piece that I think was one of those that should probably not have been dismantled and just kept up forever. Or rebuilt.
They should have turned it into an actual restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And all the dialogue, just this flirtatious character development between Vincent and Mia that, again, you could sit in that booth with them and just listen to them banter kind of all night. And then the dance sequence that, Travolta, obviously known for his dance sequences in Saturday Night Fever and known for Grease and everything, is such a big part, the biggest part of his early career. Now 1994 rolls around and he's doing yet another iconic dance number.
It's perfect. Who else do you put in there? Imagine
Yeah.
Madsen doing that. Come on.
No way. No way.
There's no way he has any rhythm.
Yeah, no, I can't see it at all. But it just feels great, but that dance is also building the connection between them. That he's worried about the chemistry between them. You can feel it, right? You can feel the chemistry. They both can feel it, and that the tension's kind of growing, especially after the dance. And were it not for the overdose sequence, what would have happened? That's where he is. Like she's wearing his jacket and finds the drugs in his pocket while he's in the bathroom trying to convince himself not to go forward with the night, to like
one drink and then I'm out.
Yeah. Which probably, I think the night was going to end badly any way you slice it, but this was probably worse.
Yeah.
And that sequence, to me, the movie is known for how violent it is. And this in particular got a lot of attention of, they're having to, she's overdosed and he brings her to Lance's house, which is Eric Stoltz, and they've got to inject adrenaline right into her heart. But we don't actually see anything. We don't see the injection. All we do is it's the build up to it, and we hear that thud. It's all about that sound effect of the thud and her reaction.
And her reaction and the needle hanging out of her chest for the rest of the scene. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's off-putting, and I feel like her reaction really sells it, right? Because it's instantaneous. As soon as the needle hits her chest, she pops up and it's frenetic, and she's just like fully recovered, and it's bananas, right? Like I feel like before this movie, that scene would be done, someone would hit the needle on the chest, and the person would just be laying there until they
woke up,
and then sat up kind of on their side and rolled up to sit to ask what was going on. But that was great, just boom, boom.
And I love that little beat of where Lance says, say something, and she says something. It's just another one of those little like dialogue things that's so humanizing from Tarantino. Then we move into the Butch world again, and we see the flashback sequence with the gold watch and another brilliant Christopher Walken monologue that similar to what we'd seen in True Romance, also written by Tarantino.
In one place he knew he could hide something, his ass. 5 long years he wore this watch up his ass. Then he died of dysentery. He gave me the watch. I hid this uncomfortable hunk of metal up my ass 2 years. Then, after 7 years, I was sent home to my family. And now, little man, I give the watch to you.
It's great walking. And I don't think he's done another Tarantino movie besides those two. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any. But it's just great dialogue.
He was in a bunch of I feel like he was in a bunch of very Tarantino-esque movies that spun off.
Sure. Oh yeah.
From this, right? Like
he was probably one of the leading actors in the reaction of Tarantino, that he was just getting cast as a gangster in like everything. But and he's not even a gangster in this movie. Like he's a military vet who's giving a son his father's gold watch that he brought back with him.
Prized watch.
Yeah. But yeah, that's another, it's all such rich characters that, you're seeing into not only Captain Kuntz's character, but Butch. You're getting a sense of Butch's father. Like there's a lot happening in that dialogue. And then young Butch is just like kind of looks like glazed over just listening to the story, but you can tell right away with adult Butch how much the impact that had. That watch is such an important, again, another sort of MacGuffin of that triggers the rest of the movie, really, for his character. And then we see, we cut to Butch, who's just, instead of throwing the fight, he's actually killed the other boxer and cost Marcellus Wallace, however much money he bet on it. And now he's on the run. And Brent, let's come back to what you were saying earlier. That
yes,
this is the part of the movie.
Pause button.
Yeah, this is where I think we take our pee breaks, make our sandwiches, go walk the dog, and without pausing. No, we have two sequences here. One in the taxi cab where Butch is kind of getting away from the arena, and then the whole sequence with Fabienne in the hotel room. That it slows everything down. It's long. I wouldn't say I love the characters, going from what we've seen up to this point in the movie.
Well, I feel like both these characters, the cab driver and Fabienne, are the two characters in this movie that feel the most like they are acting.
Yeah.
Where everybody else feels really natural and it's coming and it feels more real, and they feel like, I don't know who those two actors are that played the characters and where they were cast from, but it feels like maybe they were traditionally trained somewhere, and that to me translates in the film and kind of messes up the pacing and the cadence of everything else that's happening. That's just like one element. Plus, I feel like the dialogue is just not as strong. I don't know if it's the dialogue that's not strong or the performances that make it seem less strong, but they definitely slow it all down and kind of ruin the rhythm for me as far as everything else that we've seen up to this point.
I can see that. Yeah, I'm completely with you on that. It feels like a slightly different movies happening right now.
Yeah. Well, even like the cab driver is all like dolled up and looks more like someone who should be coming off the set of like Casablanca, and like that kind of performance and that kind of like I half missed like the lighting across her eyes, like that's the type of, it just kind of felt like that in that scene. Like it's just you get the rear projection in the background. Like it feels out of place in comparison to the rest of what we've seen.
It's the rest of the movie is so modern and fresh and different. And suddenly you have this one scene that's like a throwback to 1940s.
Right.
That just feels off. And especially watching it now, like it never felt right to me, but watching it now, these two sequences really stand out. Mm-hmm. That, and Fabienne too who's basically a sweet, innocent character, but you're not used to seeing those in the rest of Tarantino's world.
Yeah, she seems totally out of place. Like it doesn't affect me as much when he comes back from being at the pawn shop and all the shit that happens between him and Marcellus.
Yeah.
But like when she's like, who's Zed and all that, like maybe it's just because it's shorter and there's some gold in there with the dialogue, but the scene inside the hotel, it seems very weighted, one-sided towards Bruce Willis, who's like losing his shit about the watch. And, she's just kind of breaking down. Like, I don't know, none of it. And their chemistry seems weird. Like it's just.
Yeah. If, I saw it as like, he should be on he's in an urgent rush to get out of town. He's going to be killed when they find him. But then it suddenly slows down to do this sort of love scene between the two of them that, there's no time for that. Get your shit and get out of there. But we kind of pivot right there until he realizes the watch is missing.
Well, but it is similar to that. Like everyone is, all these people, whatever their like goal in the movie is, they're all pausing to have like their normal life. They have normal conversations. He's with his girlfriend. Like they're getting ready together. Like it is more of the same. It's just that it's a little more typical of like sort of a rom-com kind of thriller, like, that they find themselves in. It's not quite because the whole rest of the movie is all kind of Tarantino weird. Like it's very strange. Like this sort of like fits a little bit on the outside, but follows the same methodology of presenting
that's
information.
True. Yeah.
Well, it just may not be the most of all the vignettes or whatever. It's the least maybe effective or something.
Well, maybe valid. To that point, like maybe it is the attempt to try and show like what Bruce Willis is trying to get to is the less chaotic, more normal, I'll say, life, and the way that it's put together is trying to establish that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Whatever it is, my least favorite part of the movie for sure.
Well, and then we get to, Butch has to go, like he needs that watch. He has to get the watch. He goes, I love that those long shots of like following him as he, tries to kind of like quietly, sneak back into his own apartment, knowing that Marcellus Wallace's guys are around somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's just a great moment inside the apartment that he gets in, finds the watch, puts the watch on. All he has to do is walk out the door, but then he notices the machine gun sitting there.
He's got to make himself some Pop-Tarts.
I was like, leave, get out of there, leave.
Yeah.
You got the watch, go. Well, of course not,
And yeah,
I was gonna say, but it's just a little more of like, no matter how much you prepare, no matter what you plan to do, luck, whether it's good or bad, can affect you. So he's the one that sort of skirts through like good luck and bad luck, and gets to the end of the movie surviving. And I guess same thing with Jules, right? Or Vincent, like that he decides to retire. We don't really know what happens to him, but he's still alive by the end of the movie. But some unfortunate things happen just because it's because you can't plan for everything. So it's like
coincidence.
Every character. Yeah, there's so much coincidence that goes on. I mean, what are the odds that the Ving Rhames is walking across the street at the exact time he leaves the apartment?
Yeah, this whole thing, this whole segment of like, what are the odds that it's Vincent in the apartment waiting for Butch, and once those Pop-Tarts pop up, Butch reacts and just blows Vincent away, kills him.
Yeah.
And yet another bathroom scene, bathroom related scene, but
a lot of bathroom stuff.
And then same thing, like where you were saying, like, what are the odds that as Butch, gets in his car and he's free, he's made it, that at the intersection at a red light, that it's Marcellus Wallace crossing the intersection, and then the car crash and everything after that. What are the odds that the safe place they run into, that Butch runs into to hide, is a store run by maniacs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very strange. But it's very Tarantino, right? It's like it's the from dusk till dawn moment is what all that is. Like,
the dark pivot.
Yeah.
And then we get to the darkest part of the movie, right? I remember, I watched this movie with my parents for the first time, and that was an awakening for me of a new level of uncomfortability.
Sodomy wasn't something that you guys chatted about over pasta at dinner?
Oh my God. Never felt more awkward. But I mean, this, they've captured Butch, they've captured Marcellus, and they're torturing them. And I mean, it's a well done scene that you stay with Butch while they take Marcellus into a separate room, and Butch is in this room with the gimp, right? Which is okay.
Weird.
Yeah. And
Whole
all
thing's
you
weird.
hear is violence happening to Marcellus. You don't know what it is, but that tension is building up. But luckily, for Butch, that he's strong-armed basically his way out of that predicament, kills the Gimp, and then that moment where he can escape if he wants to. And he chooses not to and chooses to save Marcellus, but then kind of goes through all the weapons that are available to him and ends on a samurai sword, which you'll see come back and kill Bill.
Yes.
And then when he goes back downstairs, basically kind of like back down to hell, that when that door opens, that was the most shocking image I had. At that time, we did not see a lot of male-on-male sexual violence.
Right.
I mean, Deliverance was another one that was
right
that happened, and that was like
72.
Yeah, for years, the only thing people talked about in Deliverance was that scene.
Which is separately from that, that's the turning point of that film, but that's a great film separately.
Deliverance,
yeah, but so it was a shocking image, and then we're all for Butch, rescuing Marcellus and whatever Marcellus is going to do to Zed, who is played by Peter Green, who had a great 94, 95 between The Mask, Pulp Fiction, The Usual Suspects. He was in a bunch, some TV, and then unfortunately got into some drug problems, and we really didn't see much more of him, although he is still acting. But such a good villain, and I think we're all in support of Marcellus doing whatever he's about to do to Zed in revenge.
Flyers and blowtorches, man.
Yeah. And Marcellus gives Butch the pass, he gives him that free pass to get out of town, and he's going to let it go, at least for now.
Yeah. He's got to get out of town, and he can never show up again.
Right.
Yeah. But he's like, we're square, which is
yeah.
good for Butch. So he gets to go ride off on Zed's chopper and ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, and technically, like we mentioned, that's the end of the story in a timeline sense. But then we kind of go backwards, right? And then we go back to the Jules and Vincent world of what happens after they've executed, the Frank Whaley, and they take Marvin in the car and accidentally, but of course another fate situation of Vincent accidentally shooting Marvin in the face and his head exploding in that car.
My God. So brutal.
And it's
there
hilarious.
Are like chunks of brain, like in some of the camera shots, you just see chunks of brain in Sam Jackson's hair.
Yeah.
Like, it is brutal.
But think about that. Like, were that to happen, they're riding around in full view of everybody with blood all over this car. So they've got to get, you understand the predicament, right? That they've got to get off the road immediately. So
yeah.
They end up with at Jimmy's house, who's played, of course, by Quentin Tarantino, using the N-word lots of times, which is an element that just doesn't feel right anymore. It didn't feel right then either, but
felt great.
It's never been right, John. But it's always been an element of Tarantino's movies. I find a movie where he doesn't use it. Like doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's gross. But we get some more. We get more character development between Jules and Vincent, right? And then of course they call a fixer in, which is Winston Wolfe, played by the great Harvey Keitel.
You're Jimmy, right? This is your house?
Sure is.
I'm Winston Wolfe. I solve problems.
Good, we got one.
So I heard. May I come in?
Yeah, please do.
You must be Jules, which would make you Vincent. Let's get down to brass tacks, gentlemen. If I was informed correctly, the clock is ticking. Is that right, Jimmy?
100%.
Your wife, Bonnie, comes home at 9:30 in the a.m. Is that correct?
Uh-huh.
I was led to believe if she comes home and finds us here, she wouldn't appreciate none too much.
You wanted that.
All right, that gives us 40 minutes to get the fuck out of Dodge. Which, if you do what I say, when I say it, should be plenty. Now, you got a corpse in a car, minus a head in a garage. Take me to it.
And this is really just a great sequence of Harvey Keitel, who, by the way, in this movie, like, is my uncle. Like,
your uncle's a fixer.
Basically, he's one of those kind of guys.
Straight shooter,
Always
no
cool.
BS. Here's what we're gonna do. Yeah,
yeah.
He walks in wearing a tuxedo at 9 a.m. I mean, this is a guy. Yeah, I get it.
So, you know, dealing with like the car, the body, all of that having to be done before Jimmy's wife is going to get home, which is why this segment's called the Bonnie situation. Just great character work between everybody. Yeah, of course, Tarantino is not like the caliber of actor that the rest of them are, but he works for what he's doing. Yeah,
he does all right.
Yeah, but the banter between Jules and Vincent and Winston is just so great. A please would be nice. Like that,
yeah. Oh my goodness.
That moment.
Like really, dude.
Yeah. And all of that leading to we see a quick view of Julia Sweeney from Saturday Night Live randomly at
that was random.
It was. I think she was friends with Quentin at the time.
Okay. So I didn't watch a lot of Saturday Night Live, but when she shows up, like I always recognized her.
Yeah.
And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it's Pat. Like I was like, that's the lady who plays Pat from Saturday Night Live. But I had I was like, why do I recognize this person? Like she's not a big name, but I know that she's familiar.
Yeah, and she's working at Monster Joe's Truck and Tow, and in the deleted scenes, you can see it's actually Dick Miller who's playing Joe of Monster Joe's.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know why that scene was cut. I think some of the deleted scenes were it was a timing thing that it threw off the pace. But would have been great to see Dick Miller. We sure loved him. And then that all leads back to the beginning of the movie, the sort of bookend of the film, that we come back to the diner scene and Pumpkin and Honey Bunny who are now holding it up, and we've seen Jules and Vincent come in. We know that they've come into the restaurant, and we get the whole religious take on life from Jules and the fact that he's gonna walk the earth as a man of peace, like going forward. And Vincent's complete objection to that, and Vincent going to the bathroom yet again.
Yeah,
a lot of bathroom stuff, and then we see the whole Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, and that the eruption of that scene and the dialogue between Vincent and the two of them, and it's just great character work. And then Vincent appearing and the standoff between these four characters. And Jules just essentially talking them off the ledge, and they get away with everything but his wallet, right? and then the Jules and Vincent,
and the briefcase,
yeah.
And
the two of them walk off at the end. And that's the end of the story. That great bookend, smart. We didn't see that again as a device that often at that point in time.
Yeah.
And it feels like we know Vincent's dead, but like it sort of feels like a little bit of a happy ending for them.
Yeah, I agree. Like it
way.
doesn't feel like a negative ending when they walk off. You're like, okay.
They're not the same characters we met in the beginning of the day, in a sense.
Right.
They've
taken their uniforms off, their suits, right? So now they're all in their dork attire that they borrowed from Tarantino, and they look like they're going to the beach.
Yeah.
And they go their separate ways, and that we don't, to this day, like there's been talk of doing a movie or a show about Jules and what happened with his character. I kind of like that we never see that again. Just let it
Yeah.
live in our imagination.
Yeah, it's fun to like fantasy. Oh, well, like, oh, what if they made that movie? What if we could see that? That would be great. But then, then it's definitive. It doesn't get to live in our
Yeah.
imaginations. And
And I
yeah,
think that the time for that passed anyway. Like I don't want to see that now. I
yeah,
would have been interested by like the mid 2000s, but that's it.
yeah. What's Jules doing 30 years later is a
Hmm.
less interesting story to tell.
Yeah, and there was a lot of rumors for Tarantino's last movie where and this is like not true. This was just, there were rumors that it was going to unite a lot of his movies and we were going to see the return of a lot of characters and everything was going to kind of come to a culmination, which does not feel like something he would do beyond maybe like one character, you know. Um,
Yeah.
like I don't want to see Jules and like Brad Pitt's character from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as an old guy like meet up, you know?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
nah, doesn't feel natural. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, all of that, God, it was just such a groundbreaking movie that really the after effect was like this tidal wave of other imitations, some of which worked and some didn't. Things like Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, 2 Days in the Valley, Destiny Turns on the Radio. I think, Brent, you mentioned Killing Zoe. There was just, it goes on and on. I mean, you can even put movies like we mentioned at Gross Point Blank have an element of like the cool gangster. All that
Right.
came from Pulp Fiction. The cool Get Shorty, all of that like is an after effect of Pulp Fiction.
Right. Is
Um,
what's that one? 10 heads in a duffel bag? Is that
8 Heads in a
is that
Duffel Bag. Joe
Yep.
Pesci and I think David Spade was in that.
right.
Somebody.
Not a great film.
No.
Um, Suicide Kings, like there's a ton of them. A lot of them have Christopher Walken in it.
Yeah. Boondock Saints. Like it's all.
Yeah,
Yeah. And Boondock Saints 2, The Return.
Yeah. Not as strong. Not as strong.
and it went on and on and on. And Tarantino would, obviously continue to make films and Kill Bill. Jackie Brown is his next film, which we talked about. Kill Bill, takes a little break and then comes out with the Kill Bill films, which are that's a world within the Tarantino universe, a movie within the Tarantino universe. That's the pilot that Mia Wallace is explaining that she was cast in. What she's explaining is Kill Bill. So that story is the pilot that she was so it's within that universe. But
I've only seen Kill Bill once. I need to go back and rewatch those.
there's a lot of people who love it. I mean, who really,
I-
really love it. And I just
good.
never
I remember
got on that.
they had just come out when we were making, or they had been out for a little bit. The first one, it was at least when we were making Kung Fu Panda, and man, you better believe there was a lot of talk of that movie as we were getting, trying to, not that we were trying to make the animated Kill Bill, but just a lot of the actors and things like that when we were screen testing, or voice testing, trying to cast the movie. So yeah, it was I think that's maybe why. I mean, I loved working on that film, but because we were so focused on Kill Bill and using so many clips, that might be why I didn't enjoy the movie the first time I saw it, because I was hearing bits and pieces of it like throughout the casting process, and I was like, oh, okay, so it's all kind of out of order and discombobulated, and so yeah.
What kind of didn't sit well with me for Kill Bill was that, and I've accepted it more now. I like the two films more now than I did when they first came out, but it wasn't as grounded in reality as Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Jackie Brown. That it felt like his version of a superhero movie, which is what he was making, really.
Yeah, it was the movie. He was making a movie of a movie.
Right. Right, exactly. And I didn't get that at the time. So I was like, it's not as, I just didn't like it as much because I didn't understand that. Now I get it and it's fine. I still don't love them, but,
And
they are what they are.
wire work at that time was like becoming crazy popular, right? I mean, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon had come out several years before that, but like really opened up the Western audience's eyes to wire work and what that could be. And so that started popping up in action movies all the time. And I know that was a pretty big element in Kill Bill as well for the action scenes. So, it's
the best thing for me about Kill Bill was that first trailer that came out.
Yeah, that trailer was unbeatable, right?
Right? Like it was one of the best trailers I've ever seen that was such a hype machine, and the music, the song that they used was just so great, and got my expectations like through the roof, I think, with everybody. And I don't know, I think they've talked about doing a third Kill Bill. Not sure. I don't know what you get out of doing that other than just Tarantino doing it for fun.
Right. Because he's always said he wanted to do the Vanita Green's daughter to come back and
get revenge.
And with the actual actor, with the actual little girl, because do it, like make that fucking movie.
Yeah,
that'd be fun. Even if it's like an hour, just make a short, more or less a short film about it. Do it. I dare you. That'd be fun. People would love that. Make it a Netflix special.
Well, there you go.
Together, people, get everybody together for a few days, shoot that thing out. Come on.
What do you guys think? So where does Pulp Fiction rank for you now? I know we may not all have seen all of Tarantino's films, but of the ones you've seen, does it rank? Is it top 3? Is it not in the top 5? What do you guys think?
It's probably. I mean, it's probably. I like it more than Usual Suspects for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember what I said on the Jackie Brown episode, to be honest. And so revisiting this movie since then kind of shifts it around, I think, a little. I mean, I don't know. He's only made what, quote unquote, 9 movies, right? So I don't know. Top 5, sure. Like, yeah.
Brent, what about you?
I'd put it in top 5. I think it probably easily sits in top 5. I'm trying to run through them now. I'm not going to rank them all right now, but
it's top 3 for me. That I would say Jackie Brown is my number 1.
Yeah.
Jackie Brown, I think, as we record this, I would say Pulp is number 2. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is like neck and neck with Pulp Fiction. That I love the world of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Again, characters I just want to hang out with, and I want to just sit there with Leo and Brad Pitt, just like with the two of them hanging out watching TV. I love that, but I also recognize you wouldn't have that without Pulp and everything that it did and the way it set up that world.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's number 2 for me right now.
Yeah, I would
just order. These are ever changing. Ordering them specifically, it changes every time you watch one of the movies or something. Yeah,
exactly. So
a fruitless exercise. Like it's the beloved. It's one of the greatest influential movies of all time. Like
I'd put it in top 5, no doubt, and it's probably in top 3. But to David's point, every time I kind of rewatch something, it reinvigorates my passion for that thing. Like Jackie Brown was a movie that I saw in the theaters that I did not like really at all the first time I saw it, and not until rewatching it for the podcast did I really love it. But man, I remember after seeing it that time how much more I just thought it was just such a well-balanced, incredibly crafted movie. And if I gave the other movies a chance like that, would I feel the same way? Probably. So, but it's I've always liked Reservoir Dogs. It's always going to live in one of my tops. This was awesome. Jackie Brown's awesome. I can tell you that I don't like Hateful Eight that much.
Yeah, that's a tough
It
one
just
for me.
doesn't keep my interest that much. And Death Proof is fun, but I don't think it's like
Right.
super super strong or anything.
There are movies where it becomes apparent that Tarantino has issues with women.
Yeah.
And Death Proof is one of them.
Sure. Yeah.
That there's something, something underneath the surface there that's bubbling up that I think exists in a lot of these movies. That you see it pop up in certain times. Death Proof is one of them. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it has, at the end sequence of the movie, it really comes out. It's like there's one woman that is the goddess character, which is in Pulp, it's Uma Thurman, and the others are, treated much, much worse. So, yeah, there's a lot to continue to debate. We could probably go for another 4 to 12 hours on all things Tarantino, but should we?
Nah.
Should we do a little box office glory and we'll see how this one did?
Sure.
Pulp Fiction was filmed in the fall of 1993 all across Los Angeles. It had only an $8 million budget.
Wow.
It opened up October 14th, 1994. It had a $108 million domestic run, a $105 million international run, for a $213 million run grand total in its initial release. So that doesn't include home video, which was an entirely separate explosion. And I include Laserdisc. I'm talking Laserdisc too.
It's home video.
And multiple, re-releases as well. It was number one opening weekend. It opened up against Wes Craven's New Nightmare, Little Giants, and Exit to Eden.
Wow.
Who was in the theater for Little Giants that weekend? I was. No, I'm just kidding.
Not me.
Wish.
Okay, it landed just ahead of Sylvester Stallone in The Specialist. It had a $9.3 million opening weekend, and it stayed in the top 10 all the way until November 18th. So probably about 5-6 weeks in the top 10. It was number 10 of 1994, landing between The Mask, couldn't take down Jim Carrey, and Interview with the Vampire. Of course, The Lion King, Forrest Gump, and True Lies were the top at the box office in 1994.
A lot of crowd pleasers right there.
Yeah, I mean,
sure are.
yeah, don't forget Speed's in there. There's the whole bunch of others that.
A lot of fun movies in '94.
Yeah, still big studio. The years of the big studio system for sure.
Yeah,
but this, an independent cracking the top 10 box office for the year, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you think about Clerks that we talked about earlier. Clerks, made for what, $10,000, and how much money?
27, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, on a credit card,
yeah.
Yep.
And the impact of that movie as well.
I think it only made $4 million, but nonetheless, that's
what's the percentage of? Huge.
Yeah, and that was just box office. So, I think Clerks is one that really caught fire when it hit video stores.
Oh yeah. Changed everything.
And one that is it's hard to watch now. That does not have the lasting power. Kids today watching Clerks are not going to identify with those characters.
No, it's very Gen X.
Probably not.
It's very Gen X in its like an young or old Gen X, like the oldest of the elder Gen X is kind of it just doesn't resonate today. That's it's still good that these movies exist because they're of their era, and it's what was of the cultural zeitgeist, or what was the comedic styling, what was what's the preference. And so it's fascinating then you've got this Pulp Fiction, which kind of just transcends genre. It's reverential to all of filmmaking in Hollywood. It's a love letter to Los Angeles as usual with him. and great talent that, from different, like we said, like he always brings in people that always had a big career but may not be as big, or some people that are brand new but just have that it factor and then become
Yeah.
superstars. So he's a
Yeah.
star
I mean,
maker.
it's interesting what happens here that, he's all, I would say all four of them, right? Five of them, Travolta, Sam Jackson, Bruce Willis, Uma, and Quentin all become the it people, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
Travolta, Sam Jackson, immediately springboard into like, just they're all over Hollywood. Bruce Willis, star status, rises back up to the top again. Quentin takes his time while he crafts whatever his next thing is. In between, he's directing an episode of ER, he's writing and acting and producing From Dusk Till Dawn, so he's still around, but not his, and of course, Four Rooms.
Yep.
But he's not directing his next, he's not rushing into his next feature. Uma Thurman actually is the one who takes a break. Like this is her big moment, and she actually slows down, and I don't think we see her again till 97. We have she comes back with Batman and Robin and The Truth About Cats and Dogs. So it's an interesting turn for her, although she'd be fine for a while. So
yeah.
then she's got Gattaca, and then she's in a bunch of stuff after that. But she didn't immediately like jump into anything like the rest of them did. But she's still the iconic, visual of this movie is her.
Yes. She's the cover girl.
And yeah, God, but we talked about it earlier. Just the impact of the movie was, to me, as strong as what Citizen Kane did, what Bonnie and Clyde did for the 60s, what Star Wars did. Like, this is on that level of, whether you like it or not, it had that kind of influence, and it changed filmmaking afterwards. And Brent, when we were in film school, like, same thing. So many people just doing mini versions of Pulp Fiction, like, all over. Yours truly included. So,
well, everybody was. I mean, when I was researching for the podcast, like I was just reading a bunch of articles over and over that were quoting several different, movie critics who at the time were in film school and stuff like that. And they were talking about the effect that it had on most of the film schools, not only domestic, but internationally as well. I mean, the effect that it had in the filmmaking and the young filmmakers in Great Britain was also like substantial. So, it was felt kind of globally.
Yeah. Well, and talking about the Oscars, it was nominated for 7 Oscars. It won 1. So it lost Best Picture to Forrest Gump. It lost Best Director to Forrest Gump. It lost Best Actor to Forrest Gump.
Just saying, Forrest Gump's pretty good, though.
It is pretty good.
We'll save that for our Gump episode. It lost Best Supporting Actor to Martin Landau and Ed Wood. It lost Best Supporting Actress to Diane Wiest in Bullets Over Broadway. It won Best Original Screenplay for Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avary. Let's see, what am I missing? I think it lost Best Editing as well. So, yeah, lost Best Editing to, you guessed it, Forrest Gump. So, in hindsight, I don't, if you could vote today, I don't know if it would go that same direction. I think it would be very different, and Pulp is going to take a lot more of those, especially editing, for crying out loud.
Yeah. I remember that Academy Awards, and I loved both those movies, both of them. And I was hoping that Pulp Fiction would win because it was so new and edgy and all that. But I remember not being mad that Forrest Gump won either because I
Well,
did
it was
love that
such a
movie.
popular movie at the time, but you look at lasting impact,
Oh,
and
yeah.
of course you don't know that when it's happening. You only know that years later.
Yeah, like in sports they do like a 10-year redraft where it's
Yeah.
like, they go back and they look at how the players from teams have done, and like if you did that for
Jesus
these
Christ.
movies, they would, I think
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction probably would have won with everything that it's done to filmmaking. And I mean, we're so far past it at this point, like people don't even
Mhm.
understand the effect.
So it's almost like the award shows are nonsense.
Yeah, insignificant and don't mean anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
It's just I mean, they openly campaign and buy people watches and
Yeah.
spa days just to get them to vote for their movie. That's how Harvey Weinstein won 1 billion Oscars. He's just a great campaigner.
Yeah.
Like,
You got to work
I
the
mean,
machine.
yeah, I mean, it's a big love fest, and you got to stroke some egos, and you write some checks, and people will give you what you want. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, so and it costs money just to even submit your damn film for all these categories, and
Yeah.
it's a campaign, so it's all garbage and worthless.
I do want to shout out two people that I have worked with that worked on this film. That Richard Middleton, who was the cast driver on this film, who was one of my production executives at the studio I worked for, and a lovely human, and George Sack, who was the water truck driver on Pulp Fiction, transportation coordinator to the stars now. Great people. So
That's
and
awesome.
cool stories for working on this one. But yeah, and as I do think that this movie has an impact on modern audiences. A lot of course, you're coming with it to it knowing everything that came afterwards, so expectations are probably in a different place. But the youngsters that I know, including my kids who've seen Pulp Fiction, really, really enjoyed it and could understand why it had the impact that it had.
Very cool.
Yeah, watching it this last time, it still felt fresh. Like it didn't feel. I didn't think that it felt stale in any way. Like I was still like, oh man, this still really plays.
It's a little bit timeless. It's in that weird Tarantino universe of nostalgic things, but also present, and it doesn't age poorly. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is a classic. I don't think I feel old saying it's a classic because I'm old, but I mean, I would say that it is definitely considered a classic. I mean, it's on so many of the top movie lists around the world at this point. It's
rightfully so.
I mean, it's, I think, considered from a filmmaking standpoint, like one of the most significant that's ever been made. Not just from our childhood, but
I want to see a follow-up, and it's Pulp Fiction, the animated series. I feel like we can make this happen. It's going to be.
I feel like I could help you on that one.
All right, let's do it. Well, I'm exhausted. I think I need a big Kahuna burger to,
does sound
get
good.
me going again. So
that's good.
All right. Well, that was our look back at Pulp Fiction. It's finally here. Next up will be our 200th episode spectacular, which also happens to be our season 6 finale. We've got a fun one that I'm excited about. All our episodes, we've had a great run here of obviously this Pulp Fiction. We've had The Abyss. We've had The Terminator. A lot of fun looking at those. But we're going to go back to the 80s, 1984 specifically, with Eddie Murphy and Beverly Hills Cop.
Ooh.
Axel Foley. Let's go.
Here we go.
Can't beat that one.
We may have we're negotiating a special guest to come on, and we will have a special announcement as well about the show. at the end of the episode. But stay tuned for that. As usual, we want to shout out and thank our friends E.K. Wimmer for the theme music, Curtis Moore for the posters. Check out our archives at reconcinemation.com. Hit us up on social media. And we're at Reconciliation Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever, and anywhere on social media. So with that, guys, thanks for taking a deep dive into Pulp Fiction. And remember, rewind, rewatch, reconsider.
Oh, boy. Oh, we're still doing that? Oh, okay. Take care.
See ya.
Ezekiel 25:17. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.